Welcome to another episode of 2 Pages of Mystery, now part of the Coil Entertainment Network. I'm your host, Rob Steele. In case you're new to the show, the purpose of this particular program is to get people published. It's really hard to get published these days by someone reputable until you've already been published, which doesn't make any sense. So what I want to do is have you send me short stories. I will publish them as ebooks on the website, 2pagesofmystery.com, and then I will also turn them into audiobooks for this show. That way you'll have something to put on your literary resume, and people will be able to become familiar with your work. How hard is that? If you'd like to send me a story, send it by email. That's the easiest way. Submit at 2pagesofmystery.com. You can even send questions if you like. It's all good here. And once there have been enough stories compiled, it will come out in a hard copy book that you will be able to hold in your hand and buy at a store. Not necessarily in that order. We'd also like to thank iTunes, the Google Play Store, and the Happy Hour Network for passing the show along. And don't forget to follow all the Coil Entertainment Network shows either on Pinterest, the YouTube channel, or even coilentertainmentnetwork.com. And now on to today's story. Childhood friend turned professional bodyguard Antonio Greene has been murdered amid allegations of blackmail, drug running, and embezzling. But with all of these suspects, how is Lieutenant Cooper Wright going to solve this one? Sit back and give a listen to Always Greener. There's a bit of personal shame that goes with this one. I knew this guy a long time ago. Geez, back in elementary school. He was a good guy back then, but the older he got, the bigger he got. By junior high, he was bigger than most of the teachers. Dumb as a brick, but huge. Made up for it by bullying people. I hear he graduated a year behind me, but only then because he bullied the principal. I can see that. Mr. Stevens was a bit of a pushover. But I can't help but thinking that if I had done something or said something, he would have turned out different. We were never really that close, but at the same time, of course, if some teacher had stepped in, or a guidance counselor, or priest, or friend, and the list goes on, I console myself that it wasn't just me that failed Tony. Unfortunately, now I get to clean up after his mess that landed him in this situation. Antonio Greene, all 6'8", about 300 solid pounds of him, lying in his garage with an axe in his neck. I figure it was something job-related. I'd encountered him a few times since school and knew he was in the personal security business. He was good at it. Provided bodyguards, or was one himself, for special events like concerts or dignitaries. Dr. Song Ho Young and CSI Mark Davis were swarming Antonio's body, collecting evidence. Cause of death looks pretty straightforward. Not much blood spatter indicates just the one blow to the neck. If you could call that a neck, looks more like a tree trunk. I leave him to it and enter the house to speak with his wife, Susie. I knew her, too, back in the day. Bit of a slut back then, but she seems to have settled down with Antonio. As I enter the kitchen, she fixes me with a vengeful stare. I didn't do it. Now tell your goon to let me go. I have never described Officer Tim Fay as a goon before. I had told him to keep her in the kitchen while we searched the rest of the house. I figured it wouldn't do to have her outside in a nightgown, even if she did have an overcoat on. I was trying to do the decent thing, and we all know how that goes. Susie, we need to look around to make sure whoever did this isn't still here. And it is a murder scene. We're just doing our jobs. I never did like you, Cooper. The word bitch runs scampering through my head, but I managed to keep it there. Susie, I know this is tough, but do you know anyone who would want to hurt Antonio? No one. He was such a loving guy. Nice to everyone he beat up. The word bitch is now riding a large pony through a field of daisies. In my head. Right. So, where would you have been last night around 6? I know she didn't do it. She didn't look strong enough to pick up the axe, much less plant it in what passed for Antonio's neck. I was with Brent OBrien. I just got home. She said, pulling at the lapel of her overcoat. I look at Officer Fay, who just shrugs and looks as confused as I feel. Brent OBrien, the basketball player? Did Antonio know? Hell yeah, I've been banging Brent for months. He's fun. I got pictures here on my phone if you want them. I hand the phone to Tim, who downloads the pictures onto his ever-present iPad. That's when one of the CSIs, a guy I don't know by name, sticks his head in the kitchen and gives me the thumbs up, meaning they're done with the house. Look, Susie, I'm sorry about Antonio. I'm going to do whatever I can to find out who did this, okay? She waves a cigarette at me noncommittally as Tim and I exit the kitchen through the door to the garage. I thought you gave her the coat to wear over the nightie. I thought you did. I rub my temples with one hand and mutter, I guess once a slut. Tim mutters something like, guess so. Tells me he'll send those pictures to my phone and joins Dr. Young in the coroner's van. The garage is taped off, and Susie knows she's not supposed to come in here. Probably will, though. Meanwhile, I'm going to go check out her alibi. I check in with Detective Manny Vasquez to get Brent OBrien's address. I'm not a big basketball fan. I enjoy watching about the first 75% of the game. It's that last 2 minutes on the clock that drags on forever. I always thought that if you're down by more than 20, there's no point in doing that foul the guy every time thing. Free throws are boring. Manny gets me O'Brien's address, and it sounds familiar. About half an hour later, I realize why. He lives next door to Anisim Orlov, my favorite Russian gangster turned sports agent. I can almost see his castle from here. O'Brien's house isn't that bad either. Last I heard, this guy was making about $20 million a season. Not a bad job. Keep in shape and play a game for a living. O'Brien himself answers the door. The door itself is oversized, but that makes sense since O'Brien is listed at about 7'6".
What do you want?
He looks a bit disheveled in an untied bathrobe and boxers. Mr. O'Brien, I'm Lieutenant Cooper Wright. Your name has come up in the course of an investigation. I'd like to ask you a few questions. O'Brien looks baffled but invites me inside. He shows me to the living room and excuses himself to get dressed, and I don't argue. I'm not sure I could stop him anyway. Well, short of shooting him. And I'm pretty sure that wouldn't go over well with the press. It's not long before he joins me, now wearing an old sweatsuit, and we both sit on opposite but facing sofas. I explain the situation in very basic terms, explain that he's Mrs. Greene's alibi, and show Mr. O'Brien one of the pictures I got from her.
That bitch! She was doing it the whole time.
That's not quite the reaction I expected. It kind of looks like you're both doing it.
No, man, that's not it.
He begins pacing like a caged animal.
Someone's been blackmailing me for months. This is one of the pictures I got sent this morning. Damn it all to hell.
He starts to throw the phone, but I half stand in the way of the trajectory the phone would take. Please don't throw my phone. It sounds a bit more desperate than I'd like. O'Brien looks at the phone as if finally realizing it isn't actually his. He inhales deeply and hands me back my phone.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. But how is somebody blackmailing you? You're not married, right?
That's not it. I knew Susie was married, but do you know her husband? He's trained in about 100 different martial arts and can kill me more ways than I care to think about. I have to send about half my paycheck to an account in the Caymans, otherwise those pics will get sent to Antonio, and I'm not interested in dying that way.
But you're still banging his wife.
She's good, and yeah, she was here last night. All night.
She was the one blackmailing me?
Damn. Can you do something about this?
I know some people. Let me pass this along and I'll see what I can do. O'Brien shows me out and I make a call to Detective Hunter Greenblack. This is more his department. I suspect he'll have Susie Greene in custody soon. Unfortunately, I believe O'Brien about the alibi. He seems genuinely scared of Antonio Greene. I can't say that I blame him. Next on my list will be to visit Antonio's office. He rents a small office space downtown for business purposes. Unfortunately, when I arrive at his office, I'm not the first policeman there. I run into Detective Calvin Glenn. He usually works night shift. He has the office taped off. He says he just heard from Manny about Mr. Greene, but his case is different. Jim Clark, Antonio's accountant, was found here last night. There was a suicide note that said he was sorry, but he couldn't find the money. Glenn also said that just about everything except some of the chairs were taken in to be processed. I look in the door before they seal the room, and wow, there's nothing to this office. Glenn says that even the bathroom is down the hall. I thank him for his time and ask him to keep me apprised if something pops up. Meanwhile, he should probably go home and get some sleep. It's close to noon, and I hear you vampires don't do much good in this sunlight. I'm trying to make a joke. As usual, it doesn't seem to go over that well, and he just stares a hole through me. The bags under his eyes make it look a bit more ominous. When I get back to my car, I make a call to the CSI lab and ask for Daryl Silverstone, our new full-time computer guy. I ask him to check Greene's computer for clients. Daryl says the only one Greene's had in the past 2 weeks is some guy named Danny Pho. Silverstone does a quick background check and says Pho is a rapper from Taiwan who gained popularity in the past year or so on YouTube. Things like that make me long for the days when artists and musicians had to work their asses off for years before getting a break and some radio play. Now all it seems you have to do is do something cute and put it on YouTube. I thank Daryl for his assistance and call Tim Fay to back me up on this one. I suspect that if this Danny Pho was hiring Antonio Greene, that he probably also has his own security. I meet Tim at Danny Pho's hotel, the Two-Cot. I always thought that sounded vaguely Star Trek. I mentioned that to Tim, who just looks at me funny. On the elevator ride up to the penthouse suite, because where else would a famous rapper be, we used Tim's phone to watch Mr. Pho's breakthrough video. This guy is horrible. This time I say it out loud. I can tell from his expression and wincing that Tim agrees, but there's something else in Tim's eye, like he recognizes Mr. Pho from somewhere other than this putrid video. When we reach the house, we're greeted by 2 armed security guards who, once we identify ourselves, reluctantly escort us into the main room of the suite. One knocks on the bedroom door across from the main door and mumbles something. Shortly, we're joined by a small Asian man with something resembling a mustache and wearing sweatpants, a faded football jersey, and a baseball cap on, well, it's not entirely on backwards. Yo, 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 what can I do for the 5-0? Well, oh boy. This stereotypical rap gestures and everything that he does make him look all the more comical to me. I try to keep my wincing on the inside, although I'm not sure how well I do it. Tim continues to look apprehensive and excuses himself. That's not like him. Something is up. I just wish he was somewhere able to communicate it. Does it have something to do with his accent? Because he doesn't quite sound like he's from Taiwan. Mr. Pho, your name has come up in our investigation, and I would like to ask you a few questions. Pho flopped back on one of the room's couches and tried to look casual. Yo, do I need my lawyer? He looks at his bodyguards, who immediately tense up. Not that I know of. I just need to ask you a few questions about Antonio Greene. I understand he was in your employ recently. Tonio! Yes, these are some of his boys, too. Tonio's a great man. I saw him fight once last time I was in town. Great fighter. I knew I had to have him in my posse. It took me a moment, but I do realize he said posse. Didn't think that was still a term. When was the last time you saw Mr. Greene? Oh, it was a few days ago. He said he had something to take care of. Wouldn't tell me what it was, though. He left me with Amos and Randy, and I think I'm in good hands. I can't think of much else to ask him. I thank him for his time, and that's when Tim rejoins us, cell phone still in hand with the screen facing me. The picture on it looks a lot like Danny Pho. Tim extends his hand and says, Yes, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Fujimoto. Danny Pho laughs and shakes Tim's hand. Fujimoto! Man, no one's called me that for years! His expression turned to something similar to horror. Tim's normally cheerful expression turned a bit more dour. Do you think it might have something to do with the outstanding warrants? Tim turns the handshake into a handcuffing experience. I thought you looked familiar. It's been a while, Danny. But I've changed, man. I'm clean now. I'm a big rapper. I'm famous. Come on, Timmy. Danny Foe's accent changed strangely from whatever that Asian one was to something Californian. You still have 3 outstanding warrants, and jumping bail from that possession with intent to sell charge wasn't that bright either. Danny here was my first big drug bust. He jumped bail and disappeared about 5 years ago. He's also put on a little weight and... what is that? Getting facial hair advice from Manny? Please. You should have stayed hidden, Danny. Coming back to this town was stupid. Tim finishes cuffing Mr. Foe, or Fujimoto, or Danny, before turning to me. During this entire event, including taking Mr. Foe, or Fujimoto, to the elevator so we could take him downtown, Amos and Randy, to the credit, didn't interfere in the slightest. As the elevator doors closed, I almost felt sorry for them. The client has just been arrested, and the boss is dead. Oh well, they're big boys. They can fend for themselves. Once we get back to the station and put Danny in a cell, I start thinking about this case. We've had several related illegalities related to the case with obvious offenders. Drugs, bail jumping, blackmail, suicide, but no murderer. Who's next? I muttered to no one in particular. Robin Kerr, your victim's manager. That was Manny Vasquez. Great, what did he do? When Hunter brought in Miss Greene, she gave up her partner. They were both blackmailing Brent OBrien. And you can add embezzling, too. The reason Mr. Clark couldn't find the money was because Kerr stole it. And he and Mrs. Greene were going to run off together. Great! A motive! Unfortunately, he has an alibi. Shit. Seriously? See, he was out of town until about an hour ago. Business trip in the Caymans. I guess he was checking up on the money firsthand. Sorry, boss. I start to head back to my desk to think this through when I'm paged over the intercom system. I guess Celine finally figured it out. I head back to the front desk where I'm greeted with a surprise and his lawyer. Mr. Wang, I remember. The man wearing the bloody T-shirt is new. My client would like to make a statement. I escort the pair to interrogation room 1 and call the CSIs to come up and collect the shirt. I also have a new one brought to the room. Whoever this guy is, he's voluntarily coming forward. No reason not to be nice to him. After he's processed, we all sit at the table and I prompt him to tell his story.
My name is George Allen. I live next door to Antonio Greene. Several months ago, he bullied me into letting him borrow my lawnmower. Last night, I tried to confront him and get it back. He said he was keeping it, but I was fed up with his bullying. I reached behind me for what I thought was a baseball bat, and I swung for his head. I just wanted to give him a big bruise or something, so he knew I meant business. I didn't realize it was an axe.
He looks like he's in shock. Of course, until a few minutes ago, he was covered in blood. My client would like to make a plea bargain. That will be something for the DA to work out. I ask where Mr. Allen has been, and Mr. Wang says he was attempting to get his affairs in order. His wife is out of town, and he's been trying to call her, and, of course, he called me. I told him to wait until I could get back in town and turn himself in. I thought someone had beaten me to it when I saw some policemen at the gate, but they were there to arrest Mr. Kerr, and I only know him because I sat next to him on the plane. He's not one of mine. My priority is Mr. Allen. Well, that doesn't happen every day. On the one hand, we caught a blackmailer, her accomplice, the embezzler, and an escapee drug runner. On the other hand, the murderer we were looking for the whole time turns himself in. All in all, not a bad day. Well, until I have to start hitting the paperwork. I guess the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, especially if he's got your lawnmower. We hope you enjoyed listening to the show. If you'd like to submit your story for an audiobook treatment and publishing on our website, don't forget to use the new email address submit@twopagesofmystery.com, and don't forget to pass the show around because it's free and it's fun. Again, thank you for listening, and until next week, keep 'em guessing.